Willow, I am so excited for this moment, and here's what we're going to do. As you know, oftentimes when we do these interviews, if you tweet a question at Steve Ryan Carter, and I use that question, I will give you a signed copy, not by me, by the one and only Tony Dungy, of his book, Uncommon Marriage, which is fantastic. And I want to just dive in right away and ask, how did you meet your wife?
Well, I actually met in Pittsburgh. I was working with the Steelers, and the Lord, just one of those things, the added benefit that he gave me. The Steelers always supported a father and son breakfast at this church in Pittsburgh, large church, very similar to this. And the player who was supposed to go the night before got sick. So the chaplain called me and said, I need you to fill in. We have to get someone there. It's something we support every year. And I was reluctant and tired, but I decided to go. I gave my talk to the boys, and right after that, the pastor said, you know, you won't believe this, but there's a girl in this congregation you really ought to meet. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I'm looking around and said, all these people, a church this large, if she doesn't have a boyfriend, that probably doesn't look that great. And meanwhile, he was telling her, Lauren, the same thing. There's this guy you need you to meet from the Steelers. And she was thinking, gosh, he's with the Steelers and he can't get a date? I mean, he must be a nerd. So she wasn't all that excited either. But the pastor was very persistent. And he introduced us finally in the 1st of July, and by November we were engaged, and we've been married 34 years now.
Moral of the story, if you need a date, come see your pastor.
Yeah. Amen.
So tell us, in 34 years of marriage, what have you learned from your wife?
I've learned a lot, actually, and I think God does put you together because you are different, and wives have different perspective. She has helped me in a lot of ways, career-wise, raising the children, making decisions. She's helped me tremendously, and she looks at things a lot differently than I do, and I try to just look with logic, and she says, no, I have a feeling about this, and knowing that God has given her intuition and given her ability to discern things, but we are different. And I think that's the one thing I've learned about marriage is if you do rely on your wife and you celebrate those differences, you have a better way to go.
It's beautiful. Now, one of the things that was so amazing, that stood out to me in your book, was when you went over to Lauren's house for that first date, her household was different than your household growing up. Can you explain that?
I grew up in a little small town, very quiet household, 4 kids, but everybody was kind of like me. My personality, quiet, maybe studious. My parents were both teachers and very calm. And Lauren's house was not that way. Her dad was a real estate agent, talked 100 miles an hour, always in a hurry. Her brothers were huge sports fans and always had advice for me. Tell Coach Noel he needs to do this. Get rid of that guy. Throw the ball to Lynn Swan more. What are you guys doing out there? So I'd get bombarded as soon as I hit the door with 1,000 things. And Lauren would come to my house and say, I don't think your family likes me. They never talk to me. So I had to understand and get used to what she was used to, and she had to get used to what I was used to, so we blended it together.
That's awesome. And how did you get into coaching?
You know, I never expected it. It was just, I think the Lord was preparing me to be a coach. He gave me parents that, you know, kind of poured into me and made me think about why I was doing things. I love sports, but I always felt I was going to play. I was a high school and college quarterback. I didn't get drafted. I went to Pittsburgh as a free agent. They switched me to defense, and so I kind of grew up on the offensive side, learned defense later on, got to play for Coach Noel for 2 years, got traded to San Francisco. I played for Bill Walsh for a year. So I got all this tremendous preparation, but it never entered my mind that I would ever be coaching. And then after my 3rd year of playing, I got traded again for a second time. I got cut, and suddenly at 25 years old, I was really done with my career and hadn't planned on that at all. And Coach Knoll called me and said, I think you would have a nice career in football. You're diligent. You're a good communicator. It wasn't anything I ever thought of, but I went there and I started from the bottom and did some special projects for him, and I loved it. I mean, the first day I went to work, I couldn't wait to go back the next day, and I just felt like this is what God has for me.
That's amazing. Now, you've had the privilege to be under some incredible coaches, like Coach Knoll. You were with Marty Schottenheimer in Kansas City. You were with Denny Green in Minnesota. What is one thing that you learned from each one of those coaches that you took to become the coach that you were?
No, 3 great mentors, and I did take a lot from each one. But Coach Knoll, when I first got there, one of the first talks he gave to the team, he said, "You're now in professional football. You're getting paid. That makes it your profession, but don't make football your life. If you make football your life, that will be a mistake. I'm here to help you get better, but you have to keep it in priority." And so for 10 years being around him, knowing that family was important, that your faith was important, that your life away from football was important, that was a great lesson for me to learn starting out. Then I went to Kansas City, and Coach Schottenheimer was just a detail-oriented guy. We spent a lot of time at the office working late hours, but going over every detail, and preparation was so important to him, and I learned that from Marty. And then I went to Minnesota and worked for Denny Green, and Denny was all about people and relationships and chemistry. It's very important to have the right people with you. We're not going to have the 53 best players, but we're going to have the 53 that make up the best team. And you've got to get a sense of what each guy needs to perform and how you can build into his life, and we're all in this together. So I think, again, it was just the Lord giving me great preparation in 15 years as an assistant, putting all these things together. When I finally got the head job in Tampa, I could draw on all of that.
Now, you, as a coach, you get an opportunity. You went from Pittsburgh to Kansas City to Minnesota, Minnesota to Tampa, Tampa to Indianapolis, and you're married. And we've got a ton of business people, men and women who are leaders who get brought to Chicago for a season, and then maybe an opportunity in Charlotte or in California comes up. How did you and your wife process and discern, is this the right place for us to go next?
It was tough, and we didn't always agree. I'd come home and say, I got this tremendous opportunity. We can leave Pittsburgh and go to Kansas City, and it's going to be great, and I get a promotion. And she said, I don't know if that's all that great, But we talked through it. What are the benefits of it? How's it going to impact our family? How's it going to impact my career? And most of the time, we'd have a good feel for it, but talking through it that way was important. When I went from Kansas City to Minnesota, and my wife looked at the weather report and it was -10, she didn't think that was such a great opportunity. So we had to work through that one a little bit. But knowing that your family is important, and again, learning that from Coach Knoll was critical, that this isn't just a move for me. It isn't just about my career. Being in it together and seeing how she could help develop, that was important. But I will say this, Steve, for us, the biggest move, when we did move, was finding a church, because we're so tied into our church and plugged in that the biggest adjustment wasn't me going to a new team or my wife trying to find new schools for the kids or whatever, but where are we going to get plugged in so we can continue to grow and continue to build both of our lives pointing towards the Lord.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. In the early 90s, you were up for some opportunities to be a head coach, and they didn't pan out. They went with a different person. And then you get this chance to go to Tampa. In the early 90s, did you ever question if you would ever actually become a head coach?
I did. I started in 1981, and about 87 or 88 people are mentioning my name. And, I figure it's just a matter of time. But now another 4 years go by, 5 years go by, and nothing happens. A year ago, and you don't even get a phone call for an interview. And then the next year you get an interview, but it doesn't pan out. They go with someone else. And I remember finally about 1994 talking to this owner, and we had a long 6-hour interview, and I'm telling my wife, boy, things are going great. We just took a break, and I think this guy really likes me. I think I'm going to get the job. And we sat back down, and he said, I just have one last thing to ask you. I read you don't use profanity. And I said, no, sir, I don't. And I read you rarely raise your voice. So I try not to. And he said, how in the world are you going to get these big, rough, tough football players to do what you want them to do if you don't curse at them and you don't yell? And I said, well, like my dad got me to do what he wanted me to do. I'm going to show them that I love them, first of all, that I really care about them. I've got their best interest in heart. I know what I'm doing, and I can help them. And I think by building those relationships, they will want to do what I ask them. And I thought that was a good answer. This guy looked me right in the eye. He said, that'll never work in the NFL. And I didn't get the job. So now I'm thinking, do I have to change my personality? A lot of people are saying, you're going to have to change. You can't be that way. But I said, that's the way God has programmed me. That's the way I believe in it. So I'm not going to change. And the chaplain of the Vikings, thank you. The chaplain told me, he said, don't worry about the next move. Be the best person that you can be. Do your job. Honor the Lord. And let God handle it. And 2 years later, I ended up getting the Buccaneers job.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, you mentioned your dad just right there and just the wisdom that he gave you. He sounds like an incredible man. Where did he go to college?
He went to the University of Michigan, yes.
Yes. I just knew it. He just, man of integrity. Okay, you go to Tampa, and while you're at Tampa, it doesn't start out great. I mean, you guys lose some games. But you turn it around. You win 5 of the last 7. There's a lot of hope going into the next few years. You make it to the playoffs, and you're almost knocking at the door of the Super Bowl, and then you get fired. So lead us through, what's it like to be fired as an NFL coach?
You know, it happens, but that one was very traumatic for me. I'd been climbing the ladder, having success, and you're really praying, Lord, where do you want this next move to be? Do you want me to take the Tampa job? If I take it, this is all you. I'm going to live for you. I'm going to work for you. And we start having success. We hadn't had a winning season in 13 years, and now we're in the playoffs. We win 10 games, then we win 11 games. We get to the championship game, and we're close. Man, we're going to get to the Super Bowl. And then they come in and say, you know what, we're not getting there fast enough. We're going to make a change. And it's like, wow, God, I thought this was all you, and I thought you were in this, and you brought us here, and, you know, what are you doing? And it took me a little while to get through that and get over and realize that God was in it. He did bring me there, but now he has something else. And then the following year, those guys won a Super Bowl with John Gruden, and I'm watching on TV, watching those guys do it. So in a way, it was painful because we weren't there. I wasn't there. But it was great to see them finish the job that we started. So it was bittersweet.
I think that's one of the things I respect about you is I think it's easy for us to watch from the outside, NBC commentator, Super Bowl champion as a player, as a coach, and then we can kind of think, you've never tasted or experienced pain. And then just to see your steady resolve all the way through in the highs and the lows.
One of the neat things about that, just how God orchestrates things. I got elected into the Hall of Fame last year, and the sports writer from, thank you. But a sports writer from Tampa wanted to interview me and do a piece on it. And he said, you know, the last time I interviewed you, you had just gotten fired. You were cleaning out boxes from your office. And now 15 years later, I'm interviewing you to go in the Hall of Fame. And he said, there must be something about your faith in that. And I said, you're right. Only God can do that. And it's been a great opportunity to have a testimony because of that.
How often do you put that Hall of Fame jacket on and just walk around the house? Just gotta, yeah.
I've done that a few times just to see if it still fits. Yeah.
So you go to Indianapolis and you've got Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and you end up winning a Super Bowl. Talk about what it felt like to join Indianapolis and get that ring.
It was a great feeling. And again, there were disappointments. There were highs and lows. We got there our first year, we made the playoffs, and we lost our first playoff game 41-0. Okay. You know, so it's kind of here we go again. We're close but not there. And then we take another couple steps, and we get there, and we get one game away from the Super Bowl a couple of times, and we can't quite win it, can't get that big play when we need it. So we've been there 5 years, and we finally get there to the championship game against New England. We've got them at home. Say, hey, this is our time. We're going to beat these guys. And we're behind for 59 minutes. We can't do anything right at the first part of the game, work our way back and win. We're going to the Super Bowl, play the Bears, and...
Real quick. Can you explain what was going through your mind when you kicked off to Devin Hester?
Yes. We had a chapel speaker that talked about David and Goliath.
Blame the pastor.
Yeah,
Blame the pastor
all the way. For 2 weeks, we said, we're not going to let Devin Hester touch the ball. That's our game plan. He's their biggest threat. We can't let him touch the ball. I hear this chapel speaker say about David, he said, the thing about David, everybody else was running from Goliath. David ran right to Goliath and hit him right between the eyes. So I get this brilliant idea on Saturday night. We're running from Devin Hester. We can't play scared. We got to kick it right to him. The first time we kicked off, we kicked it right to him, and 12 seconds later, he had scored. So I started to say, that's the last chapel service I'm going to, but it was just, he said I didn't take the right point out of it. But we go on, we come back, we win that game, and the last 40 seconds of the game, I'm just thinking about everybody that had poured into my life to help me get there, all the work that our team had put in for 5 years, trying to make it there, all the people in Indianapolis who were now excited about this. And it was a great feeling. But the bigger thing for me, I knew that about 10 minutes after the game, there were going to be 115 million people tuned in. I was going to have 30 seconds to say what I wanted to say about the team. And I talked about representing the Lord. And yes, we were representing Indianapolis. We were representing the Colts family. But more than anything, we wanted to represent the Lord and do it His way. And I got to give that message to 115 million people. So it was pretty awesome.
That Super Bowl victory came 1 year after probably the hardest loss that you and your wife ever went through in the loss of your son, Jamie. And how did you and Lauren get through that? And who did you lean on during that time?
No, the year before, 2005, we had probably our best team. We're rolling along, 13 wins in a row. And in December, we lost our son, 18 years old. And it was very, very tough. You never expect that as a parent. But we did get to lean on our church community so much and our Christian family, and realizing that God was still there in the midst of a tremendously tough time, that the Lord was going to draw closer to us. And we were very much comforted by our faith, by the Holy Spirit, by our friends, and we had to look to the Lord to pull us through. But one of my favorite verses in 2 Corinthians, Paul starts out the book by saying, God comforts us so that we can comfort others. And I think that's what happened. We got that comfort from a lot of people, and now we're able to share with people, you know, no matter how tough it looks, you are going to be able to make it through if you keep your focus on the Lord.
That's awesome. You know, you got to take a tour of the care center, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of our care center?
I am so blown away. If you haven't, I'm sure most of you have been through there, but it just blew me away, because when you think of care center, I think of a food pantry, and it is so much more than that. But there's so many volunteers, and there's people who say, I may not be able to give a sermon, I may not be able to play and sing on the praise team, but here's what I can contribute. I can help with dental work, I can help with optical, I can wash clothes, I can sort groceries, I can watch children. And you've got so many people down there volunteering and saying, you know what, this is the church. This is what we're all about. And I couldn't wait. I'm sending messages back to my church. You should see what they have here, and we can put this in place. I think we could get this going. I think it's so beautiful. And the scripture reference is Acts 2:45 that's on the cornerstone down there, that everybody took what they had and they brought it together and they donated. And to me, that's awesome. You should congratulate yourselves. It's an awesome ministry.
It's awesome. Love to do a couple rapid fire questions. I'm going to start with Anita Rodriguez, so I'll come down after and I'll give you the book. But what advice would you give to a single person to be as successful as your marriage has been?
To a single person is, number one, let the Lord send your mate to you. It's hard to do when you're there waiting, God, I need someone, I need to be married, I want this relationship, and then we kind of get ahead of the Lord. This might be it, this might be that. Be patient, let the Lord send the right person to you, but then understand when that person does come that Satan doesn't want to see you successful. So you have to be ready for those attacks that'll come at you. Keep your focus on the Lord, on the Bible, and that'll help you get through all the attacks that are going to come your way.
That's awesome. That's awesome advice. Okay, rapid fire. What is your life verse?
My life verse is Matthew 16:26. My mom told it to me when I was a very young boy, and I've remembered it ever since. What would it profit a man to gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? And I think that's so important to remember.
That's awesome. What do the Bears need to make the playoffs next year?
They need a couple things. They're a little ways away, but understand, Carolina, we saw them come kind of out of nowhere. Atlanta, that progress can happen very quickly. So I just think a little bit stronger defense and focus and that togetherness, they're going to be okay.
Greatest quarterback of all time? Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana? Who?
Well, Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls, I think. Tom Brady's won 5, but Peyton Manning won 1 for me. So to me, that counts more than anything else.
2 more quick questions. When you first saw Peyton scream out Omaha, what does that actually mean?
Most of the time, it means something. Sometimes it doesn't mean anything, but most of the time it's either changing the play to the second play we called in the huddle, or it's reminding everybody that the snap count is on 1, 0 for 1.
Oh, okay. No, awesome.
But don't get zeroed in on that, because sometimes it doesn't mean anything.
Gosh, it's amazing. And then last question, how can we pray for you? I feel like you have this platform. You are trying to proclaim the message of good news of hope in Christ, and God is just blessing you in your marriage, and you and Lauren are just embodying this. How can we as a church pray for you?
I think really pray for our family, that we're able to stay together and stay unified, and we know we're going to get some attacks because, again, Satan doesn't want this word to go out, so that we would just stay focused on the Lord and stay true to Him, and all 12 of us now.
Can you explain about the 12? Because I don't know if anyone might not know what you and your wife have done with adoption.
Yeah. Well, my wife loves kids. She was a first grade teacher, and so we have adopted quite a few kids. We have what we call our first wave, which was 33 to 25 now, and now we've got a second wave, 7 adopted kids who are from 16 to 14 months. And thank you. My wife, awesome. Yeah. And it's crazy because if I'm by myself with the young kids, people always say, gosh, are these your grandkids? If my wife's by herself with them, they say, boy, you look good for just having a baby. So I think she's got a little more youth on her side than I do.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for how you have served our church and how you are serving Christ with the platforms that He's given to you, and many more blessings upon you. Willow, can we thank Coach Tony Dungy?
Thank you.